Yeah.
as one of the victims. But there's a picture of her, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Prince Edward, so of the royal family together when she was like 15. And she was in this Miami, when I mentioned at the intro, the Miami Herald writings or journalism that came out on November 18th. She was in there, but she was videotaped as well, talking about how Epstein had hundreds of victims. So it's people have this kind of, it seems like in a lot of the conversations they have, like, oh, this guy was just victimizing 5 or 10 people. Not according to the victims, that's not the case. He had rotating victims coming in and out, being farmed out, and hanging out with and traveling on these jets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't want to get lost. See, the whole thing about the jets and the Lolita Express and the little black book and pedophile island, whenever you hear these expressions, that's the low-hanging fruit that's put out there for you by these people with the balls, okay? And with the Mossad connections. They want you to think this is all on airplanes and jets and off on islands.
Right.
This happened in Manhattan. This happened next door to Bill Cosby. How come nobody's talking about Bill? By the way, Trump has an island right next to Epstein's island. Did you know that?
Right. So maybe we can talk about that. That part of the story is that he had a private jet with a black book that was leaked by somebody who worked for Epstein, who subsequently died. That had names of people on there that, names that we all know. Names like Kevin Spacey, Bill Clinton. Courtney Love. So Epstein had a book. He had a Rolodex, so to speak, of famous people that he was associating with.
Yeah, it was the butler who coined the name Lolita Express. He tried to sell that little black book, and the little black book had many, many names in it, but the ones that were underlined was code for massage, which is what was code for going with these girls.
Gotcha.
The thing is, too, you got to remember, it was Ghislaine Maxwell's job to go out, and this is talked about in the Miami Herald article, which, by the way, and let's go on the record here, I'm totally unimpressed with that whole coverage there. But the thing is that her role was to go around to the different massage resorts and spas and stuff like that and try and recruit girls to give massages. Okay? But she was recruiting a 15-year-old towel folder in this case. Now, there's no way you can tell me that Mr. Donald Trump, who lived at Mar-a-Lago, keep in mind, he lives there. Okay, that's his house. That's where his kids go. That's where his wife goes. That's where, right? And
Right.
you're telling me he doesn't know what goes on under his own roof? He was friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. He knows this little girl, Virginia Roberts. He knows her dad. Her dad worked there in the maintenance department and retired with his own horse ranch on a maintenance worker's salary under the great Mr. Donald Trump. Now, if you look at some of the lawsuits with Trump, he was sued at a golf course, a property owned in Los Angeles, and one of the complaints they had over there is that when he would show up 3 times a year, he would complain about that there weren't enough attractive women working there. So they would have to schedule attractive women on the days they knew he was coming. So he had such attention to detail what was going on. This other property only visited there 4 or 5 times a year. But you're trying to tell me that the property that he lived at, where friends of his are there recruiting his employees, and he's not aware of what's going on? I find that very hard to believe.
Well, I also find it, these are the girls that came forward for the Miami Herald. When they were children being raped, they obviously were not sophisticated. They were not wearing, now they're older, they're 30, maybe 35, talking about their experiences. But there's probably a whole host of other people. And there clearly have been lawsuits, according, to information that Epstein is settling civil cases with a variety of different people. So, the amount of victims that are public, and those cases probably have some kind of NDA or non-publicity element to it. Like, you can't go forward if we give you this money. So, there's probably a lot more to that story than is known publicly. But I think that just going back to Epstein and going back to his conviction is that, according to the Miami Herald article, when he came to an agreement after he got, I think, arrested, but they were actually the something very odd happened. Well, bigwigs got involved with his case. Ken Starr, who wrote the Starr Report about the Clinton, upon which our now Supreme Court Justice worked on, what was his name? Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh worked for Starr during the Starr Report, but Starr was involved in the defense for Epstein and all these bigwigs. And they said in that article, which was remarkable, nothing I'd ever heard of, is that the prosecutor sent the charges to the defense to have them edited and send it back. Like, it's off the chart. So there's all this inappropriate. And then the person who was involved with that case, who was the head chief prosecutor, I believe at the time in Florida, is now the head of the Department of Agriculture, correct? Acosta?
Yeah, Acosta wrote during all this time. I just want to back up for real quick. One thing, you talk about Andrew York, Epstein, and Trump. There are photographs of the three of them attending a tennis tournament at Mar-a-Lago, okay? The photographs themselves have been scrubbed, but we have the titles. They came up I think it was a docu-search that came up. And as far as Virginia Roberts, too, you talk about the photograph of Virginia Roberts with Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell. There's other photographs of this little child where she's on the Staten Island ferry, where the photographs were attached to a lawsuit, one of the original lawsuits. This is a little girl. This is a little kid, man, wearing a sweatshirt and shorts and stuff like that. This is not some teenage kid, man. This was a little kid when she first got mixed up with these people. And there's transcripts of her conversations with her mother, her poor mother, with her mother saying, you have to get away from these people somehow. You have to figure out how to get away from them. Now, you got to remember, too,
what lawsuit was that? I don't understand.
That's one of the very, very original lawsuits against the victim.
The civil case against him, right?
One of the Brad Edwards lawsuits down there.
Gotcha.
For the big one, the one that really counts, the one that's going against the victims' rights advocacy department there.
Right, because that was the chief complaint of these girls, is that they were denied their rights under the victims' advocacy. There's a statute in Florida that they say they were supposed to be sign off on the conviction, right? And that never happened.
Yeah, well, in any kind of case, you notify the victims of what's going on. They made no effort in this case whatsoever. It was hidden from them on purpose. It said this was done in a sealed, what do you call the penalty phase was sealed.
Right.
It's outrageous.
And so that was, and Dershowitz, it was Dershowitz, Starr, all these bigwigs came in. It was kind of like a little dream team, right?
Right, and that's what's, because when you mentioned Acosta's low-hanging fruit as well. We know about Acosta because he wrote a 3-page letter talking about that. Oh my goodness, when I was down there in the Southern District, the Attorney General down there, prosecutor's office, they were investigating my family and they put political pressure on me. They had private investigators chasing me around. And he wrote this 3-page letter. Now, how do we know about that 3-page letter? Well, it goes back to the balls. Conchita Sarnoff was the spokesperson on that. She's the one who broke that story and published that letter. That's how we know about Mr. Acosta, and I bought into it at the time. I was talking about this. Oh, my goodness, they put pressure on him. This is like Rudy Giuliani. Go back and listen to some of my first interviews on this thing. My first shows I did about this, man. I was a babe in the woods back in those days, man. Okay?
So you're saying Conchita Alonso is like a limited hangout operative who only puts out a quarter or half of the story intentionally.
I'm saying she's got some great balls, man. She puts on these great balls. Okay, whatever else she's up to, man, I don't know. All I can tell you is the facts. She got a Mossad publisher, an organization with a number in Beverly Hills and a thing down in Florida. She knows everybody's involved, and she puts out a book on it.
She was also kind of involved in the whole Haiti fiasco as well, too, right?
Well, you know what, man? I didn't catch that one, but I'd love to look into that some more. That was so
okay, because I think that she did the same thing where they didn't get into the pretty gnarly details of the totality of the trafficking that was going on down there and the looting and stuff like that. So,
I got to tell you,
and that's not outside of the realm of possibility that these very wealthy people, give somebody a donation of $250,000. They just say talk the party line. I want you to talk about this, blah, blah, blah.
Anything's possible, and I've talked to a lot of people down there in that Palm Beach circles and stuff like that, and it seems like one day they're saying one thing, the next day they're saying something else. And I could tell you something else. I've been working on a sex trafficking case up here in Nevada. There's no resources available for these young women that are being brutalized and thrown out and getting arrested when you go to the cops for help. They get arrested.
Right. It sounds like the whole thing that went down in Omaha where the victims actually go to jail. Right.
So I can tell you, in real life, it's not all this pretty thing where you have these balls and everybody's being taken care of. I haven't been invited to these balls.
Gotcha. Well, did you ever read about the story of Hunter S. Thompson when he went down to Palm Beach? No. And it the people were very strange and fake, and these are very I can't remember the name of the book that he wrote about that, but
you were mentioning
series of articles.
I mentioned Acosta. Okay, Acosta was the guy down there in charge of this case. He's the one that gave them the sweetheart deal. By the way, too, there was some negotiations too between, I believe it was either Comey or Mueller in this, who was the head of the FBI, who actually used Epstein as some type of informant in this case.
Confidential was the CI. He was a confidential informant.
Right around the same time.
So that's another. Mueller was working and had possible leniency with somebody who was raping and trafficking underage girls.
Absolutely. There's no doubt that there's been leniency. Leniency.
Supreme, right. Yeah, so that's why this guy Sass is having it looked over, and William Barr is going to look into it. God only knows what the results will be. But
wait, William Barr worked for the same, what is that, the Eccles and whatever, Kirkland and Ellis. I always get that name wrong. William Barr, anyway. Well, Miami Herald, right? And everybody's coming out. Oh my goodness, there's this guy down in Palm Beach, and he used political influence to get out of these serious charges. He was facing 40 years. Anybody, you or me, would have got life. He's facing 40 years.
Question.
Yeah, and he used political influence to get out of this. And then the next week, William Barr is being appointed Attorney General.
Right.
Okay, and he worked for the company. He worked for Kirkland and Ellis before this and after this. And everybody said, now Ben Sass. Okay, I sent these letters to the Department of Justice. We want to look into all this. And he's Acosta, right? Because Acosta was the guy down there, and then Trump appoints Acosta to be the head of the Labor Department, right? He's Secretary of Labor.
Right. So it doesn't hurt his career. He actually steps up in his political career, right?
But what
after giving the sweetheart deal,
right? And Ben Sass, so I suppose we're gonna look into him in a minute. But okay, well, boy, Ben Sass is a hero. He's writing a letter to DOJ. He wants this looked into. He wants us to look into Acosta, because we know about Acosta from Conchita, the balls, right?
Gotcha.
But does anybody know the name Bruce Reinhardt?
Not me.
Nobody knows, because it's
So who's Bruce Reinhardt?
Well, no, but William is supposed to be looking over here, man, at the airplanes and then the island, man. I don't have you distracted yet. Bruce Reinhardt was the assistant U.S. attorney under Mr. Acosta, who quit his job January 1st, 2008, and went to work representing Jeffrey Epstein on January 2nd, 2008.
Wow. Crazy.
But nobody knows his name.
All the information that they had at the office and then goes to work for the guy. That should not even be legal. It shouldn't even be legal. Off the charts.
There was another case. It was even worse than that I saw recently. I forget. I'll probably never remember right now, but it was even worse than that. What was it? Another day. But so that kind of...
Well, here's another thing about Acosta is that there were only state charges. There were no federal charges, even though the women were or the girls were being trafficked outside of the country and into New York and all these multi-state elements that would involve the FBI or Department of Justice.
Well, absolutely, but I know kidnapping is a federal offense. I'm sure human trafficking is too on some level. They can get themselves involved in so many various ways, civil rights. But the thing is,
the other thing that the public may not know about the sweetheart deal that Epstein got is that it was only, I think, 18 months.
Yeah.
And he served time, and he was allowed to leave jail. It was just a very soft sentence, but I think that he could spend time at home or have weekends off. I don't even remember, but he wasn't sitting in jail for the whole time.
Oh, no. It was 18 months. He only did 13 months. It was done in a private wing, not even in the state police, state prison or the county jail. It was in the sheriff's jail in a private wing that was being refurbished after he'd given them a $90,000 donation to that same sheriff's department. He only had to stay there Monday to Saturday. During a sleepover, Monday to Saturday, he had to stay there all day Sunday. And then he could leave. He had a special office set up down there where he hired off-duty sheriffs to take him back and forth to the office and stand outside his door and wait for him at the office. So a lot of shenanigans went on there as well. I believe it was Nick Bryant who got a hold of his commissary records. And the guy, even with the little bit of time he was spending there all by himself, he had to buy Jergens hand lotion down there because he still couldn't keep his hands off himself while doing 8 hours a night in a jail. Okay? One of his most
Right, and Nick Bryant wrote about the Franklin scandal. So
right, and I had
that
Nick
was what happened in Omaha,
yeah.
Nebraska.
Interesting too. I had Nick Bryant on the show about this. He didn't really want to talk about Epstein. He wanted to talk about the other one, but I got him to talk a little bit.